Special wishes of a good Shabbos and a Chag Sameach to everybody. I'd like to address briefly over this video the question of why it is that we have a practice of studying Pirkei Avos beginning on Pesach all the way through Rosh Hashanah and primarily during the Sfiras Omer period to begin with. And I'd like to suggest two different answers that I think both relate to the Shabbos and Yantif that we're about to experience. On a simple level, we know that the period of Sfiras Omer is tragic because, as the Talmud tells us in Masechta Yevamos, that Rabbi Kiva had 24,000 students, but despite their great learning and presumably their great piety in ritual areas, Ben Adam Lamakom, Lo Nohagu Kavod Zeh Bazeh. They didn't treat each other with respect, and this was, of course, a very deep betrayal of their Rebbe's philosophy. V'ahavta l'reacha kamocha zeh klal gadol batorah. The most important thing in the world is to treat other people as you would wish to be treated. As Hillel once told the putative convert, as the Talmud tells us in Masechta Shabbos, that which you don't want done to you, don't do to other people. Da'alach sani lechavrach lo sa'aved. The rest of the Torah is a commentary on that principle. Idach perushahi zil gemur. Go and study it. So on one level, at the basic level, we could well understand that during the period of Sfiras HaOmer, when we reflect on the fact that even great Torah scholars sadly can be deficient when it comes to interpersonal interactions and ethical conduct, lo nagu kavod zeh bazeh, that we commit ourselves to the study of the text of Pirkei Avos, which is all about the musarim and the midos, the values, the ethics, and the character traits that we seek to instill in ourselves. The Bartanura has a remarkable comment in the introduction to Pirkei Avos that we'll talk a little bit about over Shabbos. We'll have shiurim every single Shabbos before Mincha and Pirkei Avos, as we do every year. Moshe kibel Torah mi Sinai, that we shouldn't think that the ethics that are contained in this work are somehow, aphorisms that the rabbis came up with, but they're part of Torah's Moshe mi Sinai. They're as much a part of the Masorah as any of the laws of Shabbos or Yantif or Kashrus themselves. A remarkable statement. But I think there's another element that sort of speaks to the 8th day of Pesach as well. If you think about the transition that we'll experience between Shabbos and Yantif, between Shvi Shel Chag and Acharon Shel Chag, Shvi Shel Chag is all about the culmination of Yetzias Mitzrayim, Kriyas Yamsuf, when we were saved from the onrushing Egyptian army in the sea. And then on the 8th day of Pesach, we turn our attention, Od Hayom Benov La'amod, to the final redemption. And what that redemption is predicated on, as we read from the Navi Yeshayahu in that magnificent Haftorah, is the idea of justice and righteousness. We hear a lot from general society about the social justice movement, but of course they're taking these ideas primarily from within our tradition. And the Navi says in inimitable language about the Melech HaMashiach, who of course will lead the redemption, V'hayat tzedek izor masnav, V'ha'amunah izor chalatzav, V'shafat b'tzedek talim, V'ochiach b'mishor la'an ve'aretz, that he will look out for those who have been oppressed, and he will judge the entire world. V'hayat tzedek izor madnav, literally he will be girded by the virtue of justice and righteousness. And that's confirmation of what we have earlier in Sefer Yeshayahu, Tzion b'mishpat yipadeh, Vishaveha bitzdaka, that Zion will only be redeemed through justice and righteousness. That if we're interested in Yemos HaMashiach, and we certainly are, that's one of the great values. The Talmud tells us that will be called before the celestial tribunal and asked, Tzipisa de Yeshua, do we look forward to better days, the days that are redemptive in nature, not because of the Jetsons and flying saucers, but as the Rambam explains, because there'll be optimal days for service of God. He even quotes the verse from the Haftorah of Achron Shel Pesach. So if we want all of that, we need to redouble our commitment to tzedek and mishpat. That, of course, was what got us started in the first place. About Avram Avinu, the Torah tells us that the reason he was chosen, ki yedativ l'man asher yitzaveh banav espeso acharav v'shamru derech Hashem la'asos tzedakah u'mishpat, and be very careful when it came to righteousness and when it came to justice. And if that's true, then we can understand at a completely different level why it's so important to study Pirkei Avos as the critical text of ethics, of justice, of honesty, of righteousness, of tzedek and mishpat. If Pesach gets us thinking about a past redemption, of course it triggers our thoughts about the ultimate redemption, Karev Yom, as we said at the end of the Seder, Asher hu lo yom v'lo laila, when God will reveal himself entirely to the Jewish people and to the entire world, and we know that will only come via the mechanism, the vehicle of tzedek umishpat, all the more reason to immerse ourselves in the study of the ethics, which is really the heart of Pirkei Avos. Wishing everybody a wonderful Shabbos, a wonderful Yadnif, as we conclude our reflections on Yetzias Mitzrayim and look forward to the ultimate redemption that will come through the substance of Pirkei Avos, through the substance of recommitting ourselves to the eternal values of the Jewish people, to tzedek umishpat, to justice and to righteousness. Good Shabbos and a good Yantif.